I think generally women are looking for like the perfect medium, at least in every category they have. So if you're too far off in one category, that could really work against you. So when we're talking about looks maxing, like, of course, if you're like too far off in your looks, and you have a lot to work on.
Like you're either too overweight or you're too thin.
Exactly.
Like you have to try to figure out somewhere in the middle.
Get to the middle with almost anything. And I think that you'll have a lot more success with the majority of women. Welcome to the Emily and Todd Podcast. Today we are talking about looks maxing. This is something that's often talked about in the manosphere. Before we get started, please remember to like and comment on this video, as it really does help with the YouTube algorithm. All right, Todd. So I feel like I've heard a lot about this in the manosphere lately from kind of all the different pills. When you hear looks maxing, what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, the name says it all, but I think the messaging out there sometimes is incorrect. Our perspective might be a little bit different than kind of what's out there. So if you break it down by the pills, the blue pill would say you don't have to do anything except for just be yourself.
Just be yourself.
Right? And the red pill, typically, like, they're pretty gym obsessed. And that's something that we can dive into a little bit deeper, which I don't necessarily agree with. And then the black pill is all about genetics. So their cures are a lot of times potentially very intrusive, like surgeries. How our perspective is going to be a little bit different is that we have you here to be able to talk about what you and your friends and people you've known really do find attractive in men versus what men think women find attractive in themselves.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me because there is quite a difference between like how women will speak when they try to tell men what they're attracted to and give them like this kind of dating advice. And men so often, I think, become frustrated. I think that there's a good argument for all sides, but I do think like where I am today, and I'll talk a little bit about the progression, but for where I am today, I really think that there's things that are very attractive about a man that has nothing to do with his looks, but there are ties to the looks, right? So there's ties of like, how does he live? What's his lifestyle? What is his health? Which does have, a physical feature about that can indicate that somebody has a similar lifestyle or a healthy lifestyle.
Of course.
But
but the big caveat I think that should be said is that the reality is that most people are meeting online, and the only thing, and that's could be even on Instagram. So it's something where the image that you portray is something where it's going to help you get in the door. And all those other things that you're talking about, which are attractive to women, which completely exist, a guy won't even get the opportunity for a woman to find that out about him unless he's able to kind of get in the door. And that's kind of what we're talking about today is, saying, how can he increase his chances?
Yeah, so you make a solid point, because I do think that's the case, especially when we're talking about dating apps and social media, where your foot forward is your looks. Like, it's literally a picture, and there's not much else that a woman can tell about you. So, with that in mind, I would say that when I was younger, and I don't want to age myself too much, but it was more of like the boy band era. And that was absolutely like what I was attracted to. So we're talking like...
So describe that look.
So we're talking, this was in my teens. So the guys had like longer hair to their ears that were typically like straight hair, not poofy. I know that's kind of the look today. And they were like thin, not muscular at all. And I don't know, different heights. I don't think the height really was a thing. But then they were wearing like oversized baggy clothing. So it was trendy clothing.
Yes.
So if I relate that to today, I think that the patterns are still there. So I think that younger women are attracted to that trendy look, which we would say now, if you go on TikTok and you look for the most subscribed to male TikToker, I think everyone would get what that look is.
I would say the pretty boy.
Yeah.
So There's two different types of gazes that women are interested kind of based upon where they are in life.
Yeah, I do think that way because even back when I was like 18, if I saw like a 40-some-year-old, even if he was, like built up, muscular, and had like a really attractive face with a lot of facial hair, like a man that I would think is attractive today is not what I think was attractive, when I was 20 or 18. It is very different. I do agree with that.
So talk to me about how it changed and what did it change to?
Yeah, so like I was saying when I was young, I think like the boy band look where, a guy didn't have as much muscle, he was more just thin and had the longer hair, turned into more of a muscular build. Totally okay too with even like them not being like really trim. Like some body fat to me is attractive.
Would it go as far as like a dad bod?
It could go as far as a dad bod.
Really?
But I think that like dad bods mean very different things to certain women.
Let me break down what a dad bod would be. Typically would be something where it's a guy who probably had trained at some point in his life and has some muscle, but also probably never watched a diet or watch what they ate a day in their life. So they have some muscle and they have a lot of body fat, or they're skinny fat, which is not a lot of muscle and decent amount of body fat.
Yeah, I'd go with the first one. I think my thought process with dad bod is like I like the dad bod after it's been like a year that they've been a dad, right? And they were fit like a year ago. And they've just kind of like let things go a little bit and just they're living their life.
Would you say that when it comes to a dad bod versus somebody who's fit, if you had to have a choice, you had a gun to your head?
See, this is where I think at that point, of course, you're comparing those two possibly like on a dating app. But if you've gotten that far to determine like who they are as a person to some degree, like that's what's going to make you choose one over the other. Like I don't think the looks, as long as a woman is attracted, she wants to dive into everything else. So as long as I'm attracted, whether it's dad bod or he's super fit, like I want to dive into now who are they as a person. But if there's like this super fit guy that I start going on dates with and he turns out to be a complete a-hole, and then there's like a guy with a dad bod and I start going on a few dates with him, like, and he's a good guy and we share values, like of course I'm going to go with the guy with the dad bod.
Sure. But here's my question though. Like, so if you were on a dating app and you saw these two guys and you knew nothing about their personality because there's nothing to know, I would think that you would probably, even unconsciously, pick the fitter guy.
Yeah, I think that it depends probably on like how he looks also, like his face.
Of course, yeah.
So that's where it's tricky because then if a man...
let's take away from this. Let's say their faces were identical.
Oh, okay.
And let's say they were both 6s or something like that. But one guy was a little overweight and the other guy was fit.
Okay, I'm going to make it even more complicated. I'll go with you on that. But then it depends on the feeling that I get from the photos, right? So if it's the guy that's fit and he's in the front of a gym mirror taking a selfie, like that's kind of a turnoff. I get kind of F-boy vibes from that.
Okay.
Versus the guy that might have a little bit of a dad bod, but he's like holding his dog, or he's out playing with his dog, or he's just outside, or he's on vacation, like enjoying something fun. That can be enough to make the guy with the dad bod more interesting.
For sure.
But I think that it's all on a scale, right? So
I think it also depends on what you're looking for.
It does depend on what you're looking for.
Because you're a relationship person. So if you were on a dating app, you would be looking for a relationship. So you would find the dog guy more appealing. But if you weren't looking for a relationship and you were just looking for a hookup, then most likely I would bet that you would choose the gym guy, even if it's a cringy photo.
Yeah.
Guys look at other guys and they say, I want to be like him and if I am like him, then I'm going to get a lot of women. But the reality is that they could be looking in the complete wrong direction.
Yeah, I think of The Rock in this kind of example, right?
Exactly.
Like, I really think that a lot of men think that is just the perfect man that every woman wants just because of his muscles. And I don't think that's the case. Like, I think that is on a scale too, right? I think generally women are looking for like the perfect medium, at least in every category they have. So if you're too far off in one category, that could really work against you. So when we're talking about looks maxing, like, of course, if you're like too far off in your looks, and you have a lot to work on.
Like you're either too overweight or you're too thin.
Exactly.
Like you have to try to figure out somewhere in the middle.
Get to the middle with almost anything. And I think that you'll have a lot more success with the majority of women.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, I think someone like The Rock or anybody in that kind of camp, it's guys who are in the weight room and understand how difficult that is, even though like he's clearly on PEDs. But at the same time, even with those PEDs, he's a genetic freak and he's put in years of time. Some guys say, I want to be like this because I want to be strong and I want to be intimidating. And other guys think that I want to do it because it'll attract women. And I think if they're doing it for the attract women piece, then they're off base. Because I don't think most women are going to be attracted to the Rock archetype versus somebody like Timothy Chalamet, like who's, not like him at all. He would be considered a pretty boy. But I think if you took the majority of women, even women, I would say up into their 30s, I would say they would probably go for more his type versus someone who is overly muscular. Because when I look at overly muscular guys who are bodybuilders or just super jacked or roid maxed, however you want to say it, I look at it as the same way as a woman who has a BBL and fake eyelashes and too much makeup, and it just comes across as try hard.
They're trying too hard.
Yes. And I don't think it ends up being attractive. I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong. As far as from a female perspective, if a guy is just juiced out of the gills.
Yeah, I think that like being passionate about something is attractive. So that, I guess, is the only caveat is, if this is a guy that's just really into fitness. But even in that case, for somebody to be into fitness and put their body at risk by like using some form of drugs just to get even more muscular, then that's ranging into maybe it's a little bit unhealthy of a passion. And then that would be a turnoff. Right, for a lot of women.
But is it something where if they're trying to attract women with that, I don't think that it's effective.
Yeah, and it's probably not going to be maintainable for a very long time. If you're in the gym working that hard in order to attract a woman, like what's going to happen even if you are successful and you get that woman, you're in a relationship. Like if that's why you've done it, then you're probably going to stop going to the gym. And then what?
Yeah. Or you're just going to live that life, which is going to end up impeding on your social life. So for example, like a lot of these guys who are really into this, they meal prep all the time. They don't go out to eat very often, that type of thing. And so it's something where they're a slave to the gym in a lot of ways. And unless you find a female companion who's in the gym as much as you, it's one of those things where it takes over your life in order to maintain that kind of muscle mass.
Yeah, I could see it as a niche market, right? That if there's a woman that is also doing the same thing and she lives a similar lifestyle, that it could work. But I know exactly what you're talking about, the meal prepping. Like they literally can't go out to dinner and enjoy a regular meal that they could order because they have to stick to their regimen and they have to go to bed by 8 o'clock every night. So they can't even stay up 1 hour later to watch a movie with you. Like it does impede on your social life unless you are both kind of following that same regimen. And then I could see it working. I just don't think that a lot of women are out there doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's a very small subgroup. But I think that's the message that the red pill's sending out a lot, is the fact that, like, you got to go to the gym, just get huge, dude. That's something that is going to change your dating life. And the reality is that most women do not care at all how much you can bench press. They do not care. Like, if you're doing it again for yourself because you enjoy that activity, that's one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And going to the gym is considered hard. And then there's soft LOOKSMAXXIng, correct?
Yes. Those things are, for example, looking at grooming and saying to yourself, I've got to be just as meticulous as a woman about this. If you have like nose hair, for example, like you got to get rid of that, and the only way you can do that is if you pay attention to that.
Yes.
Like a lot of guys don't. Like short nails that are clean, that's something that's pretty simple. For example, like don't leave the house unless you've brushed your teeth, because you don't want to have bad breath. Always have breath mints on you, for example. Like that could, especially if you're going to interact with somebody and you're on a date.
Yeah, and I'd say make sure that you're going to your dental checkups.
Oh, of course,
every 6
absolutely.
Months. Get your teeth cleaned.
Yeah, well, I think I know it's so obvious, but the reality is that I've known guys who haven't gone to the dentist in years.
Me too.
And so I think, yes, going to the dentist, getting teeth cleanings, getting your teeth taken care of, flossing is super important, and just having good dental hygiene. That's huge. If you don't take care of these things are going to really harm you. And so, for example, like, having greasy or unkempt hair, or if you are balding and you're hanging on to those last few strands, right?
Yeah,
like
don't do the comb over.
No, don't do the comb over, and just shave it off. But here's something that I really think that guys have to do is that if you're balding or bald, I think that you have to shave it off. But I think what really complements that well is a really good beard. But I think there's two types of beards, though. There's beards that guys think are cool, and then there's beards that women think are cool.
Oh, that's true.
And so what I think guys think are cool is kind of that really long, unkempt beard that, is very masculine and, tough. And it's like Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant, just like that,
it's untouched,
but also just, like that badass type. But I think the reality is that, yeah, guys think that's cool on themselves and other guys, but I think most women see that as kind of dirty and what's in there, and it just doesn't appeal to the female gaze versus something where it's much more manicured.
I agree. Plus, like some beard oil, it
so
smells
soft.
good. It's soft. Absolutely. I think that's attractive.
Yeah, you just can't go overboard as far as just like letting it grow, because a lot of women just are not attracted to that look.
Yeah. Just the simple trimming, like you mentioned the nose hairs too. And then I could say like even eyebrows. You don't want to go crazy with the eyebrows.
No.
You don't want to like trim them like I would trim mine.
Of course.
But like if you're really like bushy and you have a lot of stragglers, like how hard is it just to do like a little clip,
Yeah.
And then
you can have your barber do that for you.
You can, yeah. So when you go get your hair cut, because that's the other piece too, is like, I don't think the length of hair matters today either. Like other than if you're balding, like we said, you don't want to like hang on to it and do a comb over. But I think that as far as like length of hair, a lot of guys could go long and a lot of guys could go super short. I think it's just about finding the look that you like and then just making sure that you're grooming around that look.
Yes. But I don't think it's necessarily the look that you like. Again, I think it's the look that females like.
That females like.
And so...
But there's so many. There's such a spectrum today, I feel like. There's...
Yes. But again, I think that there's some things that guys can do wrong. So, for example, if you're an older guy, like long hair usually doesn't look very good on older guys as a rule. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're in 20s, you can kind of pull it off. But then it's one of those things where...
like ponytail long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You know what I mean? And so it's something that they should probably stay away from. I think most guys look better with kind of shorter haircuts.
Yeah, but I've also seen it where guys that are getting a little bit older, like they trim their hair so short, but they have like a really good head of hair. Like they should highlight that. Like they should grow it out just a little bit more.
Yes.
Not super long at all, just like enough to see that he has like a really nice full head of hair and highlight that.
Exactly. Yeah, versus like having like a 1950s flat top.
Yeah.
Which is just, I don't think looks good on.
High and tight.
Yeah, I don't think it looks good on most men.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Looking like a drill sergeant or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny, you'll still see guys walking around with their head looking like a square. Mm-hmm. And, how many women is that going to appeal to?
Yeah, I think, again, that's like sticking to a lifestyle that maybe they had when they were younger, if they were in the military and they just like stuck to it and didn't change.
Mm-hmm. I think most people do soft LOOKSMAXXING techniques without even really kind of knowing it. But I think that there are a subset of guys that in the past didn't do this. And because they didn't do it in the past, they're not doing it in the future. And then I think there's some guys, especially who were raised without men in their lives, that, for example, may not even know how to properly shave. Do you know what I mean?
Like
because that was something,
taught.
That was something that I remember being taught by my dad how to do that. But if your dad's not around, it's something that a woman can teach a man, obviously, but it's not.
It's not being modeled. I feel like that's the difficulty, right? Like when kids are especially growing up without a father, if they're a boy, if they're a male, that's really hard to just like teach somebody without modeling it yourself.
Exactly. So it kind of starts there, and you can go on YouTube, and you could find tutorials on both soft and hard LOOKSMAXXING in a lot of different areas. So, but I think it's something that is really important. But I think the most important part is appealing to the female gaze, not to the male gaze. And the male gaze is different than the female gaze, because what that essentially means is that when guys are looking at other guys, they are saying that I think that looks good and I want to look like that. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. But if you're trying to date and you're in the dating market, what you should be is trying to appeal to what females want, not what you want, which may sound controversial, but in today's dating market, you need all the help that you can get.
Yeah, it might be controversial, and I think that guys honestly just have a hard time knowing what is attractive for a woman. And I get it, because I think that for a lot of women, they make it unclear. Like even when they try to speak about this topic, even when I try to speak about this topic, like I find that it's difficult to narrow down. When you compare it to a woman, when a woman is young and growing up, like we have so many little things that are taught to us to like maintain ourselves. Like we're painting our nails by the time we're 8, if not before that, but at least like ourselves by the age of 8. And guys, like there's none of that. They're not even thinking about like, mommy trim my nails for me. And so that's just not highlighted. It's not entwined in how they grow up. So I can see how it's difficult that like all of a sudden, especially with the changing world today, and that there is more of that highlight on how a man looks, kind of like how it used to be for women.
Yes.
That there's a disconnect. It's hard for them to know like what is the right thing, what is attractive to a woman.
Exactly. And so that's why we're talking about this today. Yeah. It's something that I think is important, and a lot of guys don't like to talk about it because it's uncomfortable, and guys usually don't talk about that with their friends.
Yeah, and the other thing that comes to mind is like skincare. I think that having a good skincare routine is really important.
Absolutely.
I feel like most guys probably just use like water and a bar soap.
Yes. This kind of goes to the opposite of the hands is feet.
Feet?
Yes.
Oh.
Like a lot of guys do not trim their nails on their feet, on their toes.
Carrying around these daggers.
And
that's dangerous. That brings to mind too, like smells, right? Like you don't want your feet to smell. That probably goes along with the fungi, right? If you have that going on, you probably have smelly feet.
Yes.
So you would definitely want to take care of it, especially, because of the smell. And then on top of that too, like wearing cologne, I think. Like not an overwhelming cologne.
No, you have to very light.
Very light cologne. So it's really just like when she gets close to you that she smells it. You don't want so much that like from far away she's, smelling it.
Yes.
But when she comes close that she can smell it. And I would recommend having another female in your life smell colognes and pick one out. Have her pick one out. Because I think there's a difference there too. I've smelled some men's cologne and like even body products. And I swear to God, they make it for other men. Like what men would think is attractive for men.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and it's like they smell like a forest. Like it's actually like not a good way to go.
Yeah. So what's a scent that a woman would really appeal to her?
I don't know the name of the scent. Well, I did just pick out cologne, so maybe I'll just name drop the cologne.
Yeah, sure.
It's Polo.
Uh-huh.
The Polo brand, like that was really good. Actually, I went to a store that had a lot of different selections, and I sprayed and I smelled them, and it was funny because I even had my kids with me, and my daughter picked the same one as me, and my son picked a different one.
There you go.
So there's a gender thing going on.
Exactly, for sure. Yeah. So if you're in someone's friend zone, get them to help you out with that. Get something out of the relationship.
Get something.
The other thing we didn't really talk about, which I think is important, is how do you feel about body hair?
Oh, body hair. Yeah, I think that there's a perfect balance.
I agree.
Not too little, not too much.
Yes.
Yeah, because I know that there's guys that shave themselves completely, like arms and everything. And I guess it's a look, that tends to go along with like bodybuilding. But I don't know. Like for me, a little bit of body hair is good. Like it's just natural.
Yeah, but I think it should be manicured and trimmed.
Manicured, yep, and trimmed.
And if you have, I think another ick I've heard from women is the back hair.
Yeah,
like
that I would shave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you have back hair, like either wax or get it shaved.
Yeah.
But I would probably say waxing because it lasts longer, right?
Yeah.
But everywhere else, I think it's just having like a uniform level of trimness.
Yeah. I think so. It's that perfect balance.
Exactly. But beyond that, I think it's something that I think you have to kind of take a look at overall picture. And if we're talking about soft looks masking techniques, we're talking about stuff that doesn't cost a lot and doesn't take a lot of time. I think those should be addressed immediately. And then the hard looks maxing thing, I think that's where potentially, depending on where you are, you might need to go into monk mode for a year.
So where they're like not dating or not
so they're
trying
not
to
even
date?
trying.
They're not even trying.
They're not even trying because they're saying, okay, there's some things that I really need to work on. Here's the other thing that I really believe when it comes to monk mode is that you can build yourself up to a point where you have real confidence in yourself because you put in the hard work, and you're not depressed because of the fact you're not getting results that you want. Because it's one of those things where if you know that you have some flaws that are fixable and you work on those, I think that you're going to be in a much better spot once you actually put yourself on the social media or the dating apps versus, just constantly getting shut down. And then it's one of those things where you're saying, this isn't working for me, so why even bother? It's demoralizing.
Yeah. I can definitely see that. I can see how it could do more damage to be trying. I guess my concern would be that a lot of men attach like the social scene to trying to date. So if they're exiting the trying to date portion, then are they exiting the social scene, or are they continuing to go out with their friends?
Yeah. Well, again,
and then if something happens, something happens.
Well, I would say that having a friendship group and going out and, doing all those things is super healthy, and you should do that regardless. I'm just saying that if you want the best chance in this terrible dating market we're in, then if you aren't at the top of your game, then it's one of those things where you're just going to make it much more difficult for yourself. So some of these things do take time. A lot of this may be common sense, but like the old saying goes, common sense isn't so common.
That is true.
So it's really being, paying attention to this stuff and then, kind of leaning into it.
Yeah, I hope a lot of guys can find this helpful.
Yes. And, make sure that if you agree or disagree, let us know in the comments.
Absolutely.
We'd like to hear from people, and we'd like to hear from people about maybe some tips they have we haven't covered.
Yeah, I'll be interested.